Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. We interact with digital infrastructure literally thousands of times a day, right? But we rarely stop to actually think about where it all came from. Well, today we're jumping right into the incredibly fascinating historical runway that led to the digital assets we just take for granted now. We are going to specifically look at the birth of the very first internet domain. So let's just dive right in.
$872 million. Now, that is not the price tag on some shiny new skyscraper in Manhattan. It's not a massive industrial complex either. That staggering figure, that's what the Gannett Company paid back in 2014 for exactly one digital asset, cars.com. Just let that sink in for a second. A simple string of characters sitting there in a web browser, and it's worth nearly $1 billion. It's wild. But how exactly did digital real estate become so insanely valuable? Like, how did we actually get here?
Think about the URL bar right there at the top of your browser. It is literally a doorway to massive modern wealth. But where did all this invisible real estate actually start? Because before the billions of dollars, before the whole dot-com boom, way before anyone even knew what a website was, there had to be a starting point, right? There had to be a first. And to really grasp the sheer magnitude of domain ownership today, we have to travel all the way back to the absolute foundations of the web.
And honestly, we have to go back a lot further than you probably think. Decades before the first microchip was even a glimmer in some engineer's eye, there was a Belgian librarian named Paul Otlet, and he actually established the theoretical foundations of the web. Way back in 1934, he envisioned what he called a mechanical collective brain connecting global information. He was essentially describing the semantic web and internet browsers before the technology to build them even existed. The really crucial takeaway here is that the human desire to connect global information, it isn't a new concept at all. It's a deeply rooted ambition. We just had to wait for the technology to finally catch up.
Okay, so fast forward to the late 1950s. The Cold War is escalating, the Soviet Union launches Sputnik, and the US, in this massive push for technological supremacy, creates ARPA in 1958. Now, almost parallel to this, in 1959, MIT students start experimenting with computer systems, and they end up birthing this incredible culture of creative problem-solving that they called hacking. And these two entirely distinct threads, massive government defense funding on one side and this rogue, brilliant academic curiosity on the other, they just converged perfectly. By 1969, Professor Leonard Kleinrock's lab over at UCLA installed the very first ARPANET host computer. The physical network was officially born.
But here's the thing, a physical network still needs efficient routing. Enter Leonard Kleinrock's brilliant 1961 architectural leap known as packet switching theory. See, instead of using a dedicated circuit switch line for one massive file, kind of like how an old telephone operator had to physically plug cables into a switchboard to keep a single continuous line open, he theorized breaking data down into tiny little packets. These packets could then dynamically route themselves through a whole web of nodes. This was the exact architectural leap that made the internet scalable. It was basically the traffic control system for the brand new digital highway.
And that brings us to just a wonderfully human moment in technological history. So October 29th, 1969, it was finally time to actually test this network out. Researchers at UCLA attempted to send the very first message over ARPANET to a computer at Stanford. The message was supposed to be the word login. Pretty simple, right? Well, they typed the L and it went through. They typed the O and it went through. And then the entire system crashed. So the historic first communication between networked computers was literally just the word LO. Behind all this flawless modern tech we use today, it really did start with a bunch of guys just trying to make it work, completely crashing the system on the third keystroke.
But, once that first connection was made, network milestones just started stacking up quickly, yet they maintained that same beautifully mundane simplicity. 2 years after that whole low incident, the very first email was sent in 1971. Now, was it some profound declaration for all of mankind? No. The data transmitted was just a test string. It was QWERTY UIOP, literally just the top row of the keyboard. We are watching the absolute foundation of the digital age being poured right here, keystroke by keystroke.
So for the next decade or so, this network just quietly grew among academics and the military. It was a utility, a tool for researchers. But to truly scale, humans needed something better than clunky numerical IP addresses. People just do not remember long strings of numbers easily. And this realization led directly to the creation of the Domain Name System, or DNS, which was introduced in 1983. And it all culminated a couple years later on March 15, 1985, when domain entry number 0000001 was officially logged into the system. Symbolics.com. That is the first domain name ever registered on the internet. Symbolics was this computer manufacturer, actually an MIT spinoff, and by claiming this specific name, they unknowingly cracked open the floodgates for the entire modern era of internet assets. Because, think about it, before Symbolics.com, there was absolutely no digital real estate to own, none. After it, the gold rush was on. This single registration is the true genesis of the digital property market we interact with today.
And once the concept of a domain was fully established, a super rapid commercial domino effect followed. In 1991, the World Wide Web gets its first website, info.cern.ch. Then, by 1994, somebody realizes, hey, you can actually sell things here, and the very first banner ad is created. Get this, it boasted an absolutely insane 44% click-through rate. I mean, in modern marketing, a 2% click-through rate is considered pretty fantastic. 44% is just absolute insanity. And then, just 1 year later, in 1995, Jeff Bezos uses a domain to launch an online bookstore called Amazon.com. The commercialization of the internet was officially operating at warp speed.
It is just incredible to step back and look at the contrast here. On one side, you have domain number 1, Symbolics.com. It was born entirely out of academic research, government funding, and just a simple desire to route information. But on the other side, you have assets like Cars.com, representing this hyper-commercialized landscape with an $872 million valuation. The fundamental technology, typing a name into a bar to reach a server, is the exact same. It hasn't changed. But the perceived value of that digital land has shifted entirely, and it's basically created a brand new global economy right out of thin air.
So, this leaves us with a pretty massive question to ponder. We've gone from a Belgian librarian's dream in 1934 to a system completely crashing on the letters LO to a single domain selling for nearly $1 billion. If the whole concept of digital ownership has evolved this wildly in just a few decades, what comes next? As we continue to blur the lines between our physical reality and our digital spaces, what is going to be the next equivalent of claiming Symbolics.com? Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the horizon, keep questioning the world around you, and I will catch you on the next one.